the executive order does make it easier because there is a clear mandate from President Trump that this needs to get done. Now it comes down to the execution and people lobbying their Congress people to educate them about Bitcoin. But what it comes down to is its necessity. The U.S. has to adopt Bitcoin in some way. I think the writing is on the wall that the debt levels, the spending is all unsustainable, and the monetary system is in danger. And this is why they're looking to stablecoins to protect dollar hegemony and to maintain dominance at the time when many other countries are de-dollarizing. So I think it's not really about Bitcoin at this point. It's about the future of the U.S. and if they understand Bitcoin's role in saving the country and saving the economic system. So it is definitely a bipartisan issue, but the positive is we're seeing bipartisan support already out the door. So I'm hopeful that it does all work out.
Samson Mow's bullish Bitcoin thesis is stronger than ever, and he believes that a Bitcoin price of $1 million is inevitable. With the latest market developments, from Trump's Bitcoin Reserve executive order to rising corporate and institutional adoption, Samson Mow is confident that this milestone is closer than most of us think. But he also points out that widespread education on Bitcoin will be key to driving even more adoption. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video, where Samson Mow delves into Bitcoin bid bonds and what this means for your financial future. But before we jump in, take a second to like the video, share it with someone who needs to see this, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay updated on all things Bitcoin and the crypto market. Thank you for watching, and enjoy the video.
If you look at the BlackRock prospectus, it's actually very flawed in how they determine the validity of a Bitcoin fork. And all of this stuff that is going to come out through legislation from the government to allow them to handle Bitcoin or how they process Bitcoin and deal with things like forks, that is where we should be fighting on to make sure they fully understand that it's not the longest chain, it's the heaviest chain, and all of this little nuance that is very important so that we can prevent another block size war. That is the big value add. And if you want to go even a step further, it's educating them on what exactly it means to live in a hyper-Bitcoinized world. You need stronger protections for property rights. You need stronger protections for the individual. Because if everyone is using Bitcoin as money and everyone's using an Aqua wallet or a self-custodial wallet where they have their own keys, there is a big danger in a lot of situations that someone can steal your money because they looked at your phone, like a police officer can scroll through your phone and ask, and there are very few protections in place, I think, to prevent this type of abuse, especially at the border, crossing a border, having your devices seized. There's an ocean of opportunity for theft, and especially when money is information like Bitcoin.
Where are you at right now with like the Omega thesis? Where are you at? Where do you are we about to hit it feels like we're getting close to a very, very suddenly part. There's so many things building up, prices chopping along. It just seems like things are ripe for, I don't know, face melting. Hopefully not down to 58K. I view that as a fairly tail risk at this point. Sorry to the 58K gang, but never say never. Without holding you to any timelines or things like that, like has your fundamental thesis changed at all? I guess would be the question.
No, I'm still expecting Omega very soon, and there are direct parallels to the Weimar Mark when it was dying, that you started seeing very wild swings. It would go from single-digit percentages to double, then triple, and then negative when there was government interventions, and then up 100%, and then back down to single digits and thousands. So we're already seeing God candles very regularly. And I see people critiquing and saying, well, where's your God candle? But there have been 8 or 9 of them so far. We're seeing more volatility because Bitcoin is more valuable. So the swings are bigger now. It's just like when Bitcoin was at 1,000, right? When you had $100 swing, it's like, wow, that's crazy. And now it's normal. It's like you don't even notice it. But we're seeing $10,000 swings. and then eventually it goes to $100,000 swings. So the Omega thesis is still very valid, and I think it is still coming. And what worries me, or I don't know if worry is the right word, but what concerns me is we're not getting that slow and steady rise, which means the rise is going to be far more violent, simply because we're not going up gradually, right? And if it's not gradually, then it's sudden. And I don't think we're going to go to 58K, but as you said, anything can happen in Bitcoin. But it's not that likely, and the reason is the composition of the hodler has changed. The structural composition has changed. It's not just like you and me and Adam Back now. It is institutions holding MicroStrategy, like pension funds holding ETFs, investors in ETFs that have it in their Roth IRA or other investment vehicles that they're probably not going to touch. So it's a very different beast now than it was a few years back, right? You have people that bought IBIT, I don't know, let's say 50 some odd dollars, or they bought IBIT when it launched at 20 some odd dollars, right? Like, are they going to sell IBIT when it goes to 12 if there was a big drawdown? Probably not, right? For them, it's a different sort of unit bias. It's like 50 to 20, not from 50 to whatever, right? So they're less likely to sell, first of all, and then they're less likely to sell when it drops because it's less scary for them because it's a different numbering system, so to speak.
As we kind of see the writing on the wall for what's coming. Is that where you're coming from there, where it's like people's, we're still very early, but time to be very early is running out and soon you'll just be regular early? Is that kind of what it comes down to?
I think so. I mean, the masses will be interested in Bitcoin when it's at 200, 300, 500K. And that's very normal, right? If you look at how ordinary people think, it's just like I see someone panicking and then I panic. There's very little foresight and planning ahead and doing research because everyone's busy with bread and circuses, right? And that's just how human civilization has evolved. And I think we're still in that very small minority, which we did the research and we went down the rabbit hole and we're listening to the Bitcoin podcast with Walker and everything like that. And yeah, you're very early if you're listening to this. And people seem to think they're not early because Bitcoin is at 80K or it went up to 108. But I still think we're very early because go back to that test again. Go to your coffee shop and ask them how much they know. The other thing I think is a very big component of it is people think that there's more supply than there is because, we always say that there's only 21 million. The supply on the exchanges is going down. But then the counterpoint I see shot back is, well, then why is the price dropping? Right? But this has nothing to do with the supply. It's just people have to sell sometimes for various reasons. They could be liquidated. They could be deleveraging. They could be doing any number of things, or they're just panicking, plainly. But the supply is dwindling, and I think that has to reconcile itself eventually. There are only 21 million coins. Several million are probably lost. Sailor has 500K. The ETFs have 1 point something million. And then Cynthia Lummis wants to buy 1 million. And if they launch the Bit bonds, the ones designed by, sorry, I forgot the name, but the one for issuing $2 trillion of debt with 10% allocated to Bitcoin, that's $200 billion of Bitcoin, which is some 3 million some odd Bitcoin that they want to buy. That's really not sustainable. And even if you look at Sailor alone, he's taken off multiple times the amount of Bitcoin that will be mined this year. Just him alone, not counting everybody else. So Bitcoin is really already deflationary if you look at it from that perspective. So it just doesn't compute. And I think when things like this don't compute, it means that there's going to be a very fast reconciliation at some point, which is the Omega candle and a fast run to 1 million.
Do you think that Trump understands kind of the high level game theory around this, like around the first mover advantage? He may not understand all the nuances of Bitcoin, but do you think he gets that game theory?
Well, I would give him some credit that he understands the game theory of it. As for Bitcoin and the implications of everything he's done, I don't think he fully understands it. If you look at the signing of the EO, it's David Sachs answering his questions, and he's like, did I promise this? You believe in it? You think it's good? I'll sign it. Right? That doesn't sound like a Michael Saylor level of conviction and understanding to me, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I think he definitely does understand there is a first mover advantage, and I definitely think he knows that the goal is to become a Bitcoin superpower, because you want as much of the valuable thing that everyone else wants.
Do you foresee any, let's say, geopolitical games being played between gold and Bitcoin as it relates to neutral reserve asset status, i.e., is there any bait and switch that happens where, okay, a lot of foreign central banks have been accumulating gold for some time. They haven't been accumulating Bitcoin. Who knows how much gold's in Fort Knox? Hopefully most of it, we'll see. But how do you see that interplay playing out? Because basically there's two candidates for neutral reserve asset, right? It's Bitcoin, it's digital gold, or it's analog gold. How do you see that shaking out?
I think it has a lot to do with how the audits of Fort Knox goes, or if there is an audit. If the audit comes back that there is not enough gold, the gold's not all there, I believe we'll see this sort of game play out where gold is demonetized in favor of Bitcoin, simply for that reason that you outlined. I think Saylor said the same thing, that you can kind of like take out your enemies that have been buying gold by dumping gold and buying Bitcoin, especially if you have more Bitcoin, right? So it's just a balance. Like, does the US have more Bitcoin or more gold? And do they see the Bitcoin as more valuable or the gold is more valuable? And I think another thing that we forgot to talk about the EO was this will now allow us to actually figure out exactly how much Bitcoin the US has, because there's a number that's often thrown out there of 200 to 220,000 Bitcoin. 95,000 is going back to Bitfinex, and the rest we don't know. The US Marshals have kind of said we don't know. So the biggest thing I think for the EO is really that we're going to find out exactly how much they have, and that might lead to us finding out how much everyone else has, because every number out there is largely an estimate or approximation. Because China too, like right now, in if you're going by general public disclosures, the US has less than China. China has 194,000. But there are also theories that China sold it, because there are some announcements in Chinese news that they disposed of some crypto assets. They didn't say Bitcoin, but they said we will dispose so much $1 billion of yuan, and this much billions of yuan, and this department will dispose this much. But we don't know. But if the U.S. comes out and says, here's our attestation, here's a signed message from the key that controls this, then I think other countries will start to need to verify how much they have. Otherwise, you don't really believe that at this point. Trust in government is at an all-time low globally. So I think there will be a race for more transparency, which is good for everybody.
Can you talk a little bit about those bit bonds and just like for the layman out there, what does that mean? What does that look like? What's the significance of that?
Right. So the proposal was for the U.S. government to issue debt that is backed by Bitcoin, 10% allocated to Bitcoin, and you get paid 1% interest. And there is a boost in the coupon payment up to 4.5%, I believe, and that's capped off with the Bitcoin gains. And it's just a way to secure U.S. debt with Bitcoin, similar to the Bitcoin bonds that I designed for El Salvador. But I think it's a very different beast if the U.S. is issuing Bitcoin-backed debt compared to a developing country. It actually may preclude the ability for any developing nation to issue a Bitcoin bond at this point, because U.S. debt is the safest debt, right? It's from the money printer itself. It's not a derivative, and it's very hard to default on that debt. So it's like in terms of Bitcoin bonds, that's like AAA rated, right? Then everything else is downstream of that. But I think it's a valid strategy, and it's probably the most reasonable thing the U.S. could do at this point. Maybe I would increase it from 10 to 20%, but we'll see what happens. I think this is further out there. The Bitcoin bill will likely pass first, creating the reserve, and then this will probably come later. But everything seems to happen faster these days, so who knows?
And that's a wrap. Did today's video bring you value? What are your thoughts on Samson Mow's $1 million Bitcoin prediction? And what do you think about Bitcoin bid bonds? Drop your comments below. I'd love to hear your take. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to see it, and hit that subscribe button for daily updates on Bitcoin and the crypto market. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.